Ignition and liftoff.
No airplane so massive had ever been seen at an air show before. When the Soviets brought their monstrous An-225 transport to Paris, you could sense that this show would be very special. In a year of remarkable international turmoil, it was no surprise that the greatest international aviation and space event would offer intrigue, excitement, and insights. But who could have forecast what came to Le Bourget Airport and the whole new spirit of East-West cooperation that blossomed at Paris in the summer of 1989? Every 2 years, the Paris Air Show settles onto Le Bourget Airport. Its airplane displays, exhibit halls, and business chalets are spread over 100 acres. In 1951, the show came to Le Bourget and included flying. Before that, first in 1909 as an add-on to an auto show, the Paris Aviation meeting took place at the Grand Palais Hall in the heart of Paris. The 1989 show ran 11 days and included over 1,600 exhibitors from 34 countries, over 200 airplanes on display, and more than 700 flight demonstrations. Nearly 200,000 visitors may come on a weekend day, but at this show, one element truly stood out. Maurice Bernet, who has worked Paris air shows for over 30 years.
Without any doubt, the difference is wonderful participation of the Soviet Union's aircraft, and peculiarly the aircraft like Sukhoi Su-27 and the most wonderful aircraft, which is the Antonov An-225 with the space shuttle on it. And this is a specific difference because their participation is also a problem, because we have never seen such a big participation.
The problem for the Paris show was a logistical one. Never before had the Soviet Union come to Paris or any other Western air event with such a massive display. A total of 12 aircraft, including fighters, transports, and helicopters never before seen outside the Soviet Union. The Russians quickly became the talk of the show. Sergei Sikorsky has followed the Soviet aerospace industry for almost 3 decades and maintains a dialogue with his Soviet counterparts.
I believe, personally, that the Soviets are here at the Paris Air Show in force, primarily because of the great interest that their products have in the Western world. Also, I believe that there is a growing awareness on the part of the Soviet aerospace industry that their products are technically at a very, very high level and competitive with the West. And I think their flight demonstrations prove certainly that they've got a great many very interesting features on their fighter and on their transport aircraft. They are going through a process, they are calling it perestroika, the reconstruction of their society. And one of the drivers that has them here is the fact that they want to enter the commercial and export market. They want to sell their products abroad.
For the Soviets, as well as every other exhibitor, the reason for coming to Paris was business.
It is an enormous opportunity to meet our worldwide customer base in a very concentrated time span, show them our products without having to take the products to them, and achieve an awful lot of savings in manpower and time from our side.
Paris is the show that attracts the customers, it attracts the manufacturers, it attracts the press. It's the showcase And companies do not come to an air show because they like to come to an air show. It's hard work. They come here because of the business opportunities.
The Paris Air Show is an air show that is the most prestigious in the world. It's an air show that we feel we must be at. And this year, 1989, we've found a very heavy visit list of the right people, of ministers of defense, of Air Force commanders, of the people that we really do want to see.
To come to Paris, it is very expensive, probably the most expensive trade show in the world. I would say our expenditure is probably $1.5 million to $2 million. I think we make contacts every time we come here that we actually work on potential customers over the next year or two till we come back the next time. But it gives us a lot of contacts, potential buyers.
Jeff Lenorovitz, European editor of Aviation Week, is based in Paris.
A major air show like the Paris Air Show is one that usually leads to business deals that are signed, sealed, and delivered sometimes months, weeks, or years after the show is over. What happens at a show like this is people meet, they discuss their needs, requirements in the back rooms, in the hallways, in the aisles between the aircraft. The flying part of the air show is the most visual and the most exciting to watch. But where a lot of the business occurs at a show like this is on the exhibit stands, where the hardware manufacturers are presenting their latest equipment for the airframe people who need to use this in the aircraft. These are landing gears, these are engines, wheels and brakes, electronic equipment. Without this hardware, which is a little less exciting to look at, an aircraft, high-speed, high-performance aircraft, couldn't get into the air nor fly. The sales that are announced here are usually deals that have been concluded well before, and for which the clients and the customers use the show as a forum to get some media or public attention. But the real business that goes on at the Paris Air Show this year, as in previous years, is what you don't see. You know, the meetings behind, the telephone conversations. These are the initial contacts that very often lead to multi-million-dollar or multi-billion-dollar sales some years later.
Airbus industry announced an increasingly full order book for its existing line and movement toward the 40 orders it seeks before committing to its new 1994 airplane, the A321-100 model. Stuart Iddles is a senior vice president for Airbus.
I think all the big announcements that are made at the air shows are the culmination of months of effort by our sales team with the customer on site. We do the signatures and we take the glory here.
All about safety of flight at Paris, the MiG-29 accident, and the lucky pilot, after this break.
Basically, our Apache manufacturing line was set up in a U-shaped format in the early days of manufacturing. The new concept came out of the development of the people on the floor.
It's a straight line, and it's a build-in-place concept. We don't know that.
Exactly 6 hours later, the plant was fully operational and ready to go back to work. It's a teamwork. The key to the whole thing was teamwork.
People with the power to do a better job build a better product. McDonnell Douglas, a company of leaders.
Helicopter aerobatics had never been approved at a Paris show, but that changed in 1989. Under stringent guidelines, an Aerospatiale Panther, a military version of the Dauphin II, demonstrated the full extent of its maneuvering capability. Changes in helicopter technology now give some models more of a tolerance for negative G loadings. While the aerobatics the Panther performed were all positive G, the changes offer the pilot an extra margin of safety, a margin that swayed show organizers to go ahead and permit helicopter loops, rolls, and hammerhead turns at Le Bourget. Aerospatiale introduced at Paris another unusual rotary wing machine, an SA-330 Puma helicopter equipped with the Orchidee radar, a battlefield surveillance system that hangs and rotates underneath the helicopter and then folds flat for landing. The high-performance strike aircraft still have a way of grabbing an airshow crowd. A Canadian Air Force McDonnell Douglas CF-18A was among the top performers. It was flown by Captain Kirk Ludy.
I'm very excited to fly for the Paris Air Show. I get a much shorter show than I normally get at any other air show. I get a 6-minute slot, and that 6 minutes is from brake release until I'm clear of the runway. So there's not a lot of time to display the magic, if you will, of the airplane. And, well, what can I say? 6 minutes of sheer pleasure, though.
Captain Ludy describes his flight.
When I get the takeoff clearance, I run the throttles to full power, full afterburner, and I'm holding the airplane on the runway, actually to effect cheat. I wait for 175 knots before I allow the airplane to climb. It gives me a crisper climb. I get the gear up, and I don't commit the nose to full vertical until I know the gear is up and the lights are out. Gentle, easy pull up the top, trying to keep wings straight and looking for a minimum of 3,500 feet along the top in full power. For this maneuver, I'm looking for 330 knots, approximately. I'll be selecting full power just prior to the maneuver. Full power will come on just now. 2 good lights. Aircraft is banked and pulling approximately 6G for the full 360-degree turn. Trying to maintain level. I'm experiencing a heavy weighted feeling in my arms and legs as I pull around the corner. I'm looking to see that I'm aligned up on show center. I roll level, accelerate to get my 130 knots again if I bled in the speed off. At this point, I pull the most G I pull during the show, grabbing the stick with both hands and pulling it right to the seat pack. Any airplane can pull G, but not many airplanes have the angle of attack authority to be able to pull the angle of attack required to perform the square loop. And I'm slowing the airplane down to reposition myself for the slow speed pass or the high angle of attack pass. This pass, our airplane is designed to pull 35 angle of attack as a design limit. We can exceed 35 degrees, but for the show high alpha pass, we use 25 degrees as a safety buffer. Around this corner, I'm reducing my speed to approximately 120 knots, using power at approximately 80% power, so I'm not using afterburner to maintain level flight. I'm using my altimeter to maintain level and my angle of attack gauge to maintain my angle of attack throughout the pass. After crossing the show center, I'll be selecting full power. Once I get both engines, and I'm assured both engines have lit, I keep raising the nose to approximately 60 degrees above the horizon and allow the airplane to accelerate at that angle and climb to 3,000 feet and approximately up to 170 knots. 3,500 feet, rolling inverted, pulling through with full power selected. I'm looking to accelerate now for the final maneuver, which will simply be a slow roll away from the direction I want to pitch back into the, to position myself for landing. At this point, I'm at 450 knots. I pulled the power to idle, and I'm using this turn with approximately 6G to slow the airplane down, to get my gear speed, 250 knots, select the gear down for the final turn and the normal landing.
Altitude. Altitude.
Safety of flight, because of past accidents at Paris and more recent accidents at other shows, is an obsession among the people who oversee the flying at Paris. That concern started right at the top with Serge Dassault, the top gun at the show, the night before the first day of flight displays.
You will have 80 aircraft presented in flight, right? You remember that this air show at the Bourget is a professional manifestation and not a public manifestation. That means that you must fly like professional and not for a show. And you have not to show that your aircraft is better than the other one. You have just to do what you can do and no more. You have to take absolutely no risk. This is very important. We cannot get one incident and not one accident.
The responsibility for safety at Paris rests with Claude Martin, who oversees everything that flies at the show. He and his staff first check the experience and qualifications of the pilots who are going to fly. Aircraft routines are presented in writing and then rehearsed for Martin in advance of opening day. For Martin, himself a senior test pilot in France, this was his second air show as flight director.
And once the flight is approved and signed by me, during the whole show, no change will be allowed, except if we discussed again and I give a second approval. So we have to check every flight, and every flight is checked, looked at from the tower by two monitors, two watchers. They are test pilots themselves, or pilots from the Air Force. And they follow all the routines and check if the program that I cleared is followed. To help them to judge if the right altitude and distance from the public, everything, etc., is followed, we have a tracking radar that gives us the coordinate of the aircraft and distance relative to the public, altitude and distance relative to Charles de Gaulle, extension of the runway, to make sure we don't have any conflict with the civil commercial flights. If there is a serious problem happening during a flight display, I will then ask the pilot to land as soon as possible, and we'll have together a debrief. And depending how serious the problem was, I will take an action. So it can be he will not fly again the next day, or he will be kicked out of the show.
Martin talks tough, and with the backing of a board of pilots, he can act decisively. Usually, though, pilot problems get resolved in what Martin refers to as the debrief stage. Martin stood firm against a Soviet request that they be permitted to fly their MiG-29 in slow flight at 300 feet, the minimum for non-aerobatic demonstration. Martin decided the slow flight was part of an aerobatic routine and potentially hazardous, particularly in a multi-engine airplane. He held the MiG to a minimum of 500 feet, a decision that likely saved a life.
And that was a sad experience, of course, but at least the result was that all the wreckage were in a position where nobody was hurt. The pilot had time, although he had a very quick and very good reaction, had the time to safely eject, and he spent only a day in the hospital.
Anatoly Kvochur, a veteran Soviet test pilot, had first flown the MiG-29 publicly at Farnborough a year earlier. We had talked to him then about engine reliability, in particular during low-altitude vertical maneuvers.
Yes, we can.
We have no problem with our engines.
The point at which Kvochur's flight began to unravel on the first day of the Paris Air Show was a routine portion of his performance. He practiced it the day before, coming through a square loop, rolling right away from the show line. Then a quick inverted half roll to allow for an inside 270-degree turn back to the show. To make a left-to-right pass in nose-high slow flight at about 100 knots. From slow flight, he transitions to an afterburner power climbing turn to the left. That's how it had gone in practice. On opening day of the show, in the middle of the afternoon flying display, Kvochur set out to do the same routine in the same MiG-29. But after his turn out of the square loop, in the midst of slow flight, something suddenly and dramatically went wrong. Slow-motion analysis of the flying sequence shows a 20-foot lick of fire from the MiG's right engine as the first apparent sign of a problem. The engine quit, possibly suffering an uncontained component failure. What happened next was a classic twin-engine accident sequence begun when the available yaw control, due to the airplane's slow speed, was not able to counter the asymmetric thrust produced by the remaining good engine. The MiG yawed right, nosing into what would have become, were there enough altitude, a right-hand spin or spiral. At this point, you can see that the left engine is operating, its upper intake vent wide open and sucking in air, its rear nozzle tight and delivering thrust normally. The dead right engine needs no air, and its nozzle is splayed open. Kvochur said he tried to assure the airplane would not hit people or property, and he talked to us about that 4 days after the accident.
First time and first mind to save the aircraft. Next mind to save the people and other aircraft. Then, when I was sure that save the aircraft impossible and safety people and another aircraft is guarantee my own safety.
He punched out none too soon, a bit over 2 seconds before the airplane hit. His parachute fully opened when he was only a few feet above ground. Again, as the airplane hit, the left engine, carrying power to impact, explodes a last gasp of fiery thrust as the airplane crumples into the grass. Had he performed this maneuver at 300 feet, Kvochur probably wouldn't have been around to talk about his mishap. Hughes Aircraft had an early model of their night vision system on display at their chalet during the show. The infrared system was set for manual tracking and documented the MiG flight. On this display, dark is hot, white is cold. You can see what may be engine parts thrown out the back of the right engine when it quit. The dark plume from the left engine clearly shows it developing power. And the telltale white or cool area between the engines is interpreted by some observers to be fuel spraying onto the skin and possibly into the air and evaporating. It will certainly be a point of interest for the joint Soviet-French investigation team that will determine the cause of this, the only flight mishap of the Paris show in 1989. Nevertheless, in its pre-show practice flights and in displays by a second MiG-29 that the Soviets brought to Paris, the airplane demonstrated its strengths. the MiG went through its paces, including the remarkable tail slide, a rare and some say risky demonstration of jet engine reliability that the Soviets introduced a year earlier at Farnborough, England. But a newer fighter from the USSR stole the show. The Su-27, never before seen outside the Soviet Union, looks at first glance a lot like the MiG-29. But it is bigger, slightly heavier, and massively more powerful. Its twin Lyulka turbofan engines capable of nearly 60,000 pounds of thrust, or 50% more than that of the MiG-29. Designed as a long-range interceptor, the airplane's large nose houses a 4-foot diameter radar array. The airplane can carry 10 metric tons of fuel internally, which give it a maximum range of over 2,200 nautical miles. Its reported top speed is Mach 2.35. And as with most Soviet airplanes, it's designed to handle rough field operations with rugged heavy-duty landing gear and grids over the lower engine intakes to block foreign object ingestion. The combat version of the airplane is single-place, but we were granted access to the cockpit of a 2-seat trainer version. A large head-up display dominates the glare shield area. Radar and infrared sensor data displays mingle with flight and navigation instruments. Most instrumentation is traditional electromechanical, not a big surprise, since the basic airplane was designed and first flown more than a decade ago. A major innovation on the 27 is its fly-by-wire control system. That and the remarkable power reserves made for some spectacular maneuvers, shown here on the pilot's aerobatic flight card. Maneuvers that had never been seen before in any flying demonstration. Neil Anderson, F-16 test pilot and now Director of Market Development for General Dynamics.
The Su-27 show, in our view, is most remarkable in the way he starts. He takes off with a very short takeoff roll. He goes immediately into an Immelmann turn, which is a vertical climb with a reversal in direction. And then to add to his show, he does a second one. It's a double Immelmann on takeoff, clean Immelmanns with no acceleration time in between them, and he levels out in the area of 3,000 or 3,500 feet. A tremendous start to a very good show. It's a good demonstration of power and turn capability, albeit at slow speed. But at slow speed, there is nothing that turns with a Sukhoi 27. It's a good reminder to the fighter pilots of the world, don't get into a slow speed fight with a Sukhoi 27, because it'll get very interesting very quickly. He does a second maneuver in the Sukhoi 27 that we think is a charming maneuver. It's one to get the crowd's attention and to keep it. And that's a climbing spiral. The airplane is established in a 45 to 60 degree climb, and the pilot applies full rolls while going up. Again, a very good application, demonstration of his power performance. The Su-27 utilizes a maneuver called the Cobra maneuver or dynamic deceleration. It involves a very heavy pitch up, then release of the controls and an aerodynamic recovery. So the airplane translates or rotates, if you will, through a 90-degree angle at least. In the case of the 27, it rotates through more than 90 degrees. And then as the pilot releases, the aerodynamic forces recover the airplane back towards level flight. Well, a maneuver by any standard used by the Su-27 is designed to rapidly decelerate the airplane. In fact, it's my belief he decelerates in the area of 200 knots in just about 3 seconds. So it's a very effective, rapid way to lose airspeed. It would seem quizzical why one would demonstrate a deceleration when the obvious attribute of that airplane is acceleration. The attribute every fighter pilot out here looks for is acceleration, turn capability, agility, and so forth. Deceleration shows some controllability, but not very much tactical significance.
Some observers, though, saw two advantages that the abrupt pitch change capability of the Su-27 would give it in a dogfight: the ability to quickly maneuver into firing position against an opponent, and a reduction in the predictability of its future flight path. The tactics could be debated, but the flying was spectacular. The Soviets unveiled another Sukhoi airplane at Paris, showing two versions of the close support attack aircraft, the Su-25 and the two-seat Su-25UB. The two-seater flew the displays. Su-25s had seen 9 years of action in Afghanistan. Masses of titanium armor wrapped the cockpit, and recent models have extra armor between the engines and along the fuselage for better protection from shoulder-fired ground-to-air heat-seeking missiles. The airplane can be loaded up with guns and rockets and is intended to go after tanks, helicopters, and small ground targets. While it was new to Paris, its flying didn't grab the crowd like that of an old airshow standby, the F-16. Bland Smith, a General Dynamics pilot, flew at Paris. We'll watch and listen to him fly and see his view through his head-up display as he flew on the 5th day of the Paris show. Watch the display for information on the F-16's altitude in feet above ground, current G-load, maximum G-load, and heading and attitude. You'll also see and hear several warnings, alerting the pilot that the landing gear is up as the airplane slows at low altitude.
Clear to go. Pack. Good burner. And there comes airspeed. Don't scare steering it off. Smoke is on. 150, we're up. Okay, crossing 32.
Warning.
1, 2.
Performers at Paris are divided into two groups, into the military pilots trying to show a little bit of the tactical applications of their airplane, and the civilian pilots trying to show off the features of the airplane for their corporation.
Warning.
maneuver in the F-16 is quite simply the 9G turn. The pilot comes in at about 375 to 390 knots, makes a 9G 360-degree turn, followed by a rotation to the vertical.
F-16, 2 minutes left.
He's in that 9G envelope, in that 9G area for anywhere from 14 to 17 seconds. It's very difficult, very demanding. It requires a great deal of skill and physical endurance on the part of the pilot to keep his mental alertness, to keep that turn carefully coordinated, to keep his altitude right. We admire and respect the people that do that kind of a turn, not only in our airplane, but in other airplanes as well.
Surface wind 22, 0 degrees, 6 knots. British aerospace and frequency?
Affirmative.
Okay, aerospace combined, line up and wait 03.
British aerospace line. Yeah, still.
The best of the civilian performers outside of General Dynamics would be the French Rafale pilot, Guy Mito-Moyade, who does a magnificent performance. It's consistent every single time he demonstrates the same high level of quality in his show. Very impressive performance. The fly-by-wire aspect of airplanes like the Rafale and the Su-27 and the F-16 doesn't mean in any way that the computer is flying the airplane. The pilot flies, controls, operates the airplane. The computer is there to make the airplane do exactly what the pilot asks it to do, not to fly the airplane. The pilot instructs the computer instructs the airplane, but the pilot does all the instruction.
The Soviets also unwrapped their Mi-28, a gunship with certain similarities to the McDonnell Douglas Apache. Sergei Sikorsky took a close look.
A very, very practical and useful piece of equipment. It's designed to live with the armored forces in the field. Very, very large, soft tires to be able to operate from extremely swampy terrain. It uses a 30mm cannon. That cannon is not an aircraft cannon. This is quite literally their 30mm armed personnel carrier cannon. They don't use aircraft-type ammunition. They use the APC ammunition. The canisters are attached right to the side of the cannon. It's a close air support aircraft, like our A-10, but it just seems to have rotors on it instead of wings. From watching the airplane fly, I think one can state that here you have a machine with a very, very high potential for further development. It has two Izotov engines, each of 2,200 shaft horsepower, so that's a total of 4,400 horsepower in this machine. It weighs about 30 to 35% more than the American Apache does, but this is more than made up for by the additional horsepower. Looking at its rate of climb, its maneuverability, I think that it certainly has to offer a lot more than what we have seen. In other words, they are not pulling out all the stops. They're probably flying it at 65 to 70% of its capabilities and not more. It shows a trend. They have learned a great deal from Afghanistan. This aircraft has been designed with very new, extremely advanced survivability features. It is, in effect, a titanium and composite armored bathtub to protect pilot and co-pilot. It also has a number of very interesting features. to allow the pilots to survive. The aircraft is extremely well designed from my point of view, and with a lot of growth potential still left in it.
The Soviets brought more to Paris than helicopters, fighters, and transports. The crispest aerobatic display came in the form of a hot pink Sukhoi Su-27, flown by the women's world aerobatic champion, Lyubov-Nemkova. A 360-horsepower 9-cylinder radial engine gives the airplane the capability for a torque roll that overwhelms the competition. Its astonishing roll rate and the composite airframe's incredible strength let pilots make twists and turns and pull Gs just not possible in other competition sport planes. A U.S. distributor has the rights to market the airplane in North America. Are the Soviets going to be selling airliners to the West? We'll find out when we return.
McDonnell Douglas, a company of leaders.
For more than 5 decades, Rockwell International has been extending the boundaries of flight, from the North American X-10 Navajo to the historic X-15 space plane, which took America's first astronauts to the brink of space, to the modern-day X-31 aircraft with its mission of giving tomorrow's fighters increased agility, and beyond to the next giant step in space flight, National Aerospace Plane. Rockwell International leads the way in aviation and space.
With the backlog of airline orders at an all-time high, the manufacturers did not have strong motivation to come to Paris to peddle their new models. Again, however, the Soviets made their presence felt with 2 new airliners, a twin-fanjet 200-seater Tupolev and a 4-engine wide-body Ilyushin, which can seat over 300. The Ilyushin came with the latest in supercritical wing design, winglets, and advanced cockpit instrumentation. The Soviets talked aggressively of marketing their new airliners. Will the Soviets be a factor as airlines cope with greater passenger loads, seek greater fuel efficiency, and replace their aging fleets? Stuart Iddles of Airbus.
We clearly see a need from the Russian side to export their airplanes for hard currency earnings. But the principal demand for their aircraft will be internal. Of course, the extent to which they can penetrate to the West depends on whether they achieve certification of their airplanes to Western standards. There is no reason technologically why they couldn't do that, but the fact is that the evolving rate standards of airworthiness require a very close dialogue, and although we have glasnost, I'm not quite sure that the dialogue is quite at the levels that it is between Europe and the US. The demand for airplanes traditionally comes in cycles, which are essentially replacement cycles, which are 20-year events. And coupled with that, you have growth. And the growth is very much a factor on world economic growth. We have predicted inside Airbus industry an average 5.5% growth throughout the world for the next 20 years. And that, coupled with the retirement, is producing the demand for airplanes. Over the last 3 years, all the demand has really been growth demand. We've not really got into the replacement cycle business yet, and half of the demand for airplanes is replacement of old airplanes. And therefore, we can probably see a sustaining of today's demand for airplanes for quite a while, even though there may be a slight reduction in the growth.
Business aircraft activities surged at Paris in 1989. Beech Aircraft had been developing the Starship corporate turboprop for more than 6 years. The radical design and its all-composite material construction created challenges for the company at every turn. But it was finally done, and Beech let everyone know.
Welcome to the ceremony marking the first delivery of a Beech Starship, the world's first all-composite business airplane. It also marks the culmination of a massive effort on the part of the men and women of the Beech Aircraft Corporation, the investment of more than 3.5 million labor hours. There are a great many technological advances embodied in this airplane, in its composite structure, its aerodynamic shape, and its advanced avionics. It is an engineering achievement of great magnitude.
Wayne Dench and his wife Anne took the keys, but left the airplane in Paris to be displayed for the rest of the show. The business aircraft sector, as reflected by action in Paris, clearly was rebounding after an almost decade-long decline. Piaggio brought a more refined prototype of its Avanti to Paris and announced a price tag, $4.13 million, and the first two buyers. Learjet, back to Paris after a 4-year hiatus, displayed a new Learjet 31 at the show, with its delta fins that enhance control at slow speeds. Canadair flew its latest to Paris, the 6013A, a long-range and trimmed-cost version of its predecessor. Piper showed off its Malibu Mirage, new model of the 6-seat pressurized aircraft with Lycoming engine and higher horsepower. And Cessna exhibited the latest in its Citation jet line, the Citation 5, with its lengthened cabin for up to 9 passengers on its first tour through Europe. TBM, with over 30 orders in hand for its new airplane, announced the go-ahead for its unique single-engine turboprop business airplane. The 300-knot cruise speed TBM 700 will be the first of its kind when it's available in 1990. Alan Paulson, chairman of Gulfstream.
And we have experienced recently a real trend of the people, European and the Middle East and Far East, coming into the market now. Well, as far as the airline transportation, I know they're experiencing real heavy travel and everything, but I think with the deregulation, they really have helped our business. I don't think the service is there today that it used to be, and I think people in the corporate world can't be sitting at airports waiting for their baggage. We're working on a prototype of the Gulfjet right now. We plan to fly the airplane around February of next year. And we're looking at, I think, a potential market of at least 1,000 airplanes, or we're not going to go in production on it. But the results of our visit here look very promising, like there is a large market.
For the pilot, the equipment that goes into the airplane is as important as the airplane itself. Bendix King introduced a novel capability to its weather radar. It electronically can turn the radar 90 degrees to show a vertical picture of the storms ahead. That information gives the pilot a better indication of storm heights and intensity, and thus more precise information to help him navigate a course in a stormy area. Weather radar won't be a big need for the Mach 25 aerospace plane. NASA's half-scale, 2.5-ton mock-up of that aircraft dominated the U.S. pavilion, a Department of Commerce effort that housed scores of U.S. enterprises involved in aerospace. For the X-30 project, some development work on engines and airframe is now going on, but the ultimate fate of the X-30 and whether it could meet a first flight projection of 1995 rests in the hands of the U.S. Congress. MBB came to Paris with its mock-up of an aerospace plane as well. The Sanger, a 1/8 scale model, could get into the upper atmosphere at hypersonic speeds and was shown with a shuttle-like stage that could stay in orbit. And among the miles of aisles of Paris exhibits, where you'd find everything in aerospace from rockets to airplane coffee makers, was this model of a proposed hydrogen-powered Airbus. The question of the moment was, of course, where would they put the passengers' baggage? Closer to reality, but farther out in space, the Hubble Space Telescope dominated the inside of the U.S. pavilion. A full-scale cutaway model showed the workings of this boxcar-sized machine, which is due for a ride into orbit in the shuttle in July of 1990. Back to Earth and in the skies over Le Bourget, the trainer wars were fiercer than ever. A dozen or so companies are gearing up to try to capture what may be a $4 billion prize when the U.S. Defense Department orders a new military flight trainer in 1994. The FAMA Pampa, powered by a Garrett 731, will likely be a competitor. Embraer's Tucano turboprop, or a version of the airplane modified by Short of Ireland, is a trainer for several air forces already. The Swiss Pilatus PC-9, an advanced version of the PC-7, flew daily at Paris. A yet-to-be-developed version of Promavia's jet Squalus could be in the running for trainer selection. The British Aerospace Hawk is expecting modifications from McDonnell Douglas to put it in the running for trainer competition. Valmet of Finland again flew its basic trainer, the Allison 250-powered turboprop Redigo. And FFA of Switzerland announced its potential entry into the trainer wars with this FFA 2000 model, the airplane to be available in 1991. The only all-U.S. entry in the trainer wars was the Jaffe SA-32T turboprop. The airplane evolved from what was initially a kit-built piston airplane, first unveiled at the U.S. Experimental Aircraft Association Convention in 1987. Designed by Ed Swearingen, the airplane is stressed for 6 Gs and powered by an Allison 250. This airplane first flew 7 days before the start of the Paris show. It flew its type demonstration on succeeding show days. Each flight at Paris became another in the test program for the Jaffe trainer. And so it was for the biggest at the show, for that matter, the biggest ever flown. The Soviets' An-225, its name Mriya, meaning dream, had made its first flight about 6 months before the air show. It still contained temporary test flight engineer stations inside and was wired with sensors at over 100 locations on the aircraft, measuring stresses, strains, and movements of the airframe and control surfaces in flight. We had a special opportunity to make a close-up inspection of the airplane. Come along for the tour of this monster, which with the shuttle on top, stood over 10 stories high. Indeed, it is huge, with a wingspan at 291 feet, nearly the size of a football field, almost a third greater than the span of a C-5B. It was designed for oversized internal and externally mounted loads, and will be capable of taking off at a maximum weight of about 1.3 million pounds. Anatoly Bulinyenko gives further details.
We have some orders. One of them, for example, to carry chemical reactor from Volgograd till North Polar Beach, where the geologists find the oil. The length of this tube is 80 meters, diameter 6 meters, and weight 120 tons. This is our nearest task for transportation.
He told us in familiar terms what the 225 could carry inside.
If you want to transport Cadillacs, we can do it approximately 60 ones.
A ladder of about 20 steps brings you to the aircraft's upper deck. In front, the flight deck is similar to the next largest Soviet transport, the An-124. 6 throttles, however, make you realize you're in an airplane that's a bit special. 2 flight engineers in side-facing stations monitor fuel, engines, and systems. A navigator operates the Omega, inertial, and other navigation systems, as well as watches for weather in the center-mounted radar display. A passageway behind the flight deck leads to crew quarters, the temporary test engineer positions and equipment bays, and to a maze of ladders up to a 2-foot hatch at the top of the wing and under the bottom of the shuttle orbiter to see views that not many people have been able to see. Most distinctive about the airplane is its huge twin tail, the tail spanning over 100 feet, its 2 vertical fins, each nearly 3 stories tall. The Soviets will deny it, but their shuttle, Buran, meaning blizzard, looks a bit like a space shuttle design seen elsewhere. Knowledgeable observers, however, could note electrical, thermal protection, and propulsion differences from U.S. orbiters. This shuttle flew back from orbit the previous November, but showed little evidence of re-entry heat blackening. The An-225 carrier rolls on 32 tires, including 2 main gear arrays of 14 tires each. It is about as long as its span, nearly 300 feet, and it is powered by 6 Lodarev power plants, each rated at 23,400 pounds of thrust. When it flies, with the orbiter on top, the airplane burns about 21 or 22 metric tons of fuel per hour. Press reports have suggested the Soviets would build as many as 24 of these aerial giants. Bulanyenko told us, however, their Kiev factory will build 5 An-225s. They will be available for charter for anyone who needs to haul a few hundred tons here and there. If the biggest ever airplane made a sensation at Le Bourget in 1989, so did the fastest, the SR-71 Blackbird, that ominous-looking reconnaissance plane that's been in service for almost a quarter of a century, still holds the absolute speed record of 2,193 miles per hour and can fly at altitudes of more than 16 miles. It made what is likely its final bow at the Paris Airshow. Unless the Air Force's plans change, the Blackbird will be phased out of service soon. The SR-71s will go to good museums and be gracefully displayed. But who can resist the look and feel of a Blackbird in flight? Who doesn't get a chill? Consider yourselves lucky, you who watched it pass by and then thunder away from Paris. You've seen a Blackbird flying, a sight and sound to tell your grandchildren about. It was one of the scores of moving moments of Paris 1989.